Greetings and welcome to this episode of Bring It On. My name's Bob Hayes and I'm going to be your host today. Our thought process on the next 3 or 4 shows we're going to bring to you is to educate the people on the proposed medical grow facility that is proposed for the industrial park in the town of Hanson. I have 2 proponents with me today that are going to try to give you their side, and then we're going to have some people come on that are going to give you their side who are against it. And we're also going to have the person who plans on running it and his daughter, Ralph and I believe Allie, come on and tell you their little part about it to try to give you some sort of an education on how to vote if it comes up for a vote or what's going to come up. But I have Joe Campbell, who's a member of the planning board, and Patrick Powers, who's a member of the finance committee in the town of Hanson. Gentlemen, thanks for coming in.
Thanks, Bob. Appreciate it.
Yeah. As you just heard for the viewers, we're going to try to, you can give your perspective of it as proponents of what's going on. Now, there was a lot of talk recently about this happening and running an ad and the legal notices in the paper, and I did some research on that, and I guess it has really nothing to do with the town of Hanson. There was a lot of questions about the town is supposed to put something in. And can either one or both of you talk about that? As I understand it, it's totally up to the business because this is a total 100% independent business. Has nothing to do with the town other than the town getting some sort of a profit from it. And again, you guys are going to educate me on what I don't know about it because I'm just as green and green literally in the subject as you guys are. So Joe, from a standpoint of zoning or planning board type of thing, can you talk a little bit about the process? Because people seem to think that the town misstepped in not advertising it.
Sure, absolutely. I think, so although we are elected officials or appointed officials to the different boards in town, that kind of makes us a little bit more just kind of enhanced citizens, if you will. We're a little bit more open to what's going on around town hall. I happen to pass by the bulletin boards outside the entryways, and we hear other boards and committees talking about what's going on. But to stay informed, it's really the individual. If you're going to look at something, you're going to look at your Express, or you're going to look at the Whitman-Hanson Community Access Channel to see what's upcoming for events.
Well, we try to do that,
Absolutely.
Keep people informed, but they don't always watch this either.
Sure, and so as anybody that's going to come to town, that's going to file for a permit for this kind of cultivation, moving forward, as well as the current applicants, that part of their host agreement is to do outreach, which is what they were doing. They're going to do outreach to the citizens of the town to let them know just what's going on and to develop a host agreement, if you will, is what the Cannabis Commission has required them to do. So as much as we are down the town hall quite often, they've done what they had to do. I actually saw the flyers, but I took it upon myself as a citizen to stay informed and make sure that I check those avenues through the papers or just through talking with the different boards and committees downtown. So pick up the phone and call them. Everybody's okay to answer and let you know what's going on.
Well, Joe, I think some of the outrage, we'll say, by some of the citizens in the town was more aimed at the selectmen didn't do their job. And this has nothing to do with the Board of Selectmen, as I understand. And that's kind of what I was trying to get across to the viewers, because as you know, people said it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they came across with, so if you know a little bit, or if you do, Patrick, about the outreach part of it, I called up a place called, I believe it's called Key for Hope, is the nonprofit organization that they run, and they talked about this outreach part and told me that it was like, we invited them to come on the show, and they are coming. And he was very concerned that he got an ad in the paper to make sure the people had enough time, and after talking to the show here, the people that run the WHCA, they're just going to come in and it's an informational thing and they don't have to run an ad.
Yeah.
So can you talk about that?
Definitely. And part of it too is, as a town, our Board of Selectmen have to be unbiased towards it, right? They can't come out as pro or against from a community outreach standpoint. They can vote their ways in Board of Selectmen meetings, they can have those conversations, but as far as advertising these community outreaches, to your point, and through the Cannabis Control Commission in Mass, it is upon the business to advertise that. And there was some irony behind it, because I know a few of the folks that were upset, to say the least, that it wasn't advertised enough. We're also saying they should have gotten a personalized letter, or hey, I didn't get a postcard. Why wasn't I informed of this? But they tend to be the people that read the legal notices. There's some folks that have been involved in town in the past that know where these things are found, that somehow magically didn't see them. And I think part of it is just this misinformation campaign around, hey, this company's not doing what they're supposed to be doing. And that's not true at all. They've had discussions with from what I understand, they've had discussions with our police chief. He was actually at the community outreach event. I showed up to it. I don't subscribe to the Whitman-Hanson newspaper, and I still saw it in their legal notices. And that's what actually, even being a board member, that's what drove me to go to the meeting that they had. And they couldn't have been more than open to have conversations, and even encouraged the fact that they taped the show, that they broadcasted it afterwards, or not the show, their meeting, so to speak, that they're coming on this show. They're looking to have additional outreach sessions as well. So you tend to see folks that don't show up to these things, or want to complain from the shadows behind it, have that kind of take. So to me, I think it's up to us as residents, and as a resident of the town, it's my responsibility to find out what's going on. The town can't send out a postcard for every single meeting that they have. They do have things posted different places that you can look and find it. I think some people felt upset because it wasn't broadcasted right in front of them, and they feel like, oh geez, something slipped past us. How did that happen? So,
Well, to maybe dissolve some of the conflict, my suggestion is going to be when they get here that maybe that they get a mailer out to everybody in town, so everybody's more than well informed. And that's what we're here to do at Whitman-Hanson Community TV Access, and with this show that I do occasionally, is to inform people about what's going on. It's kind of like we had a discussion before this, and I got this big sunburn because I'm too dumb to wear a hat when I planted the garden yesterday.
At least you're planting, though.
It is what it is, Okay, let's get to the why you guys for it. Patrick, you're a guy that understands finances. What's the dollar and cents issue on this? People would probably want to know that.
So there's a couple of things that, I look at this from a couple different lenses, right? I'm a resident in town. I've been a taxpayer resident for about 6 years in town. I have kids that go to our school districts. We make use of some of the different facilities around town. And on top of that, I am, a volunteer appointed person in the finance committee. So I'm not here to speak on behalf of the committee, but, some of the decisions that I make behind it. We have currently in place, basically a stigma that, geez, maybe Hanson isn't pro-business, right? So we have a business that wants to come into town. Whether you call it cannabis or marijuana or whatever you want to call it, it's an agricultural business. They're not selling direct to consumers. It's a wholesale grow facility that meets the guidelines, the state laws, and even some of the zoning things that we have in place. So how do we say no to that as a town? How do we say no to this potential revenue? I'm a little hesitant to give a number, and the only reason being we saw a lot of proponents of the recreational side throw out numbers like, oh, it'll only make 30,000, it'll only make 30,000. But then we watched these towns that got in early to the recreational side, direct to consumer sales, and they're making hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenue. To me, this is the perfect compromise between the people that don't want a recreational facility, but are okay with it being sold or grown in the state. Because we as a town, if you remember our first vote, we voted yes to have this in our state, right? We voted yes. Later on, we tried to have a moratorium. It didn't pass, so it was still legalized. And then we had our town vote to not allow recreation. So again, this falls into some people in town do want to have access to it. Some people don't. This is the perfect compromise. Realistically, this business could pick up and go 100 yards down the street and end up in Bridgewater, Whitman, Abington, wherever they want to go, and we're going to see those tax dollars go out. As somebody who sits on the town finance committee, I see the need for revenue that we have in this town. We have different enterprise accounts that haven't been making money for a while. They don't have to be money makers, but they should at least break even, and they're not breaking even. So we have folks in town that don't want to raise our tax burden to our citizens, but then I can't see how on the other end they don't want to bring in revenue. We have to do one or the other, or we have to cut services. Realistically, to keep the town moving forward financially in a strong position, this is something to me that's a perfect solution to appease both sides. Regardless of where you stand, it appeases both sides in my mind. So.
Well, Joe, I want to ask you a little bit about the planning board side of it. I understand, and Patrick just touched on it, this is not going to be a place that sells any type of cannabis, marijuana, or any of the byproduct that comes from it anywhere in Hanson, then it's strictly wholesale, as you was that the term you used, Patrick?
Yeah.
They grow it.
I don't know the
inside-
official state term, but
Yeah.
it's
Okay. Well,
wholesaler, yeah.
I guess my question is, Joe, do they grow it inside a building that's
Sure.
all sealed up, and then they bring it somewhere else? Once they grow it, they cut it, and somebody else.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm not familiar with the
Well,
process.
the
That's what
industrial
I'm trying to
park.
drag out here.
Sure. The industrial park in Hanson is zoned for. It has been zoned for medical, and we've changed that now so that it's zoned for cultivation, which is what we have here. It's basically a garden inside of a building. To sell or anything of that nature, that's been turned down at the most recent town meeting, and it wouldn't have happened anyway had it passed, because you couldn't have a retail storefront within our industrial park. That's the whole point of the industrial park. So what we have here is we have, like I was saying, for basic terms, is a garden inside of a building. We have a very low risk business with a very high gain for the town, and we need to caveat what Patrick was saying, we need to look at what's going to be best for the town as a whole. And for this kind of a business to come in with such a low risk, where it's just cultivation, there's no processing or anything of that nature as it stands right now from what they've come to the town with. It's just a garden inside of a building. And to have such a low risk with that, for the high gain, with the host agreement we have, it's a 3% tax for 5 years. So even if the business, I'm not going to be afraid to throw out some numbers, they're hypotheticals, but if the business paid $1 million in the first year, 3% of that's $300,000. So over 5 years, that's $1.5 million for us to just give a business some storefronts, give a business a space for them to be able to cultivate some soil and grow something out of it. It's pretty good return on such a low risk.
Okay, I think though 3% of $1 million is 30,000.
3% of $1 million is 30,000. Yeah, so my math is off. Never claimed to be a math expert.
I think part of that, and part of what was stuck in your head was in the beginning when the recreational sales were discussed, a lot of folks went with that and said, oh, it's going to be $1 million, so 30,000, so that's probably why it was stuck in your head.
That's where I was pulling that.
I guess my question is back to what you were talking about. So there's absolutely no retail sales of this product. It's a building, a garden inside of a building. When you say cultivation, I'm just trying to get it for the people in Hanson. Let's say, what do you mean cultivation? You're growing it.
I'd say you're growing it.
Simple business terms. They're going to grow marijuana inside of a building.
Right.
I know that you guys probably both see the internet as we do, and some of the questions that I saw and some of the people, security, water usage, odor.
So
is this all addressed? And I'm going to ask
Yeah,
the
definitely.
grower when I get him here.
So the good part with us as a town is the process we have in place to go through the Board of Selectmen, to go through some of the different avenues we have, is we can make sure those things are addressed before the business even opens its doors, right? So those are definitely concerns. Even as a parent in town, that's a concern for me as well. We've had our part of the community agreement is the police chief has to look at it. This facility will be one of the most secure, it has to be by state law, one of the most secure facilities in our town. And I'm talking more secure than banks and probably more secure than our own police station. Part of that is because they have to have active cameras. Any employee that goes in has to be certified through the state and through a state background check. It's not, you can walk up to a lot of our storefronts, I hope this never happens, throw a rock through a window and take whatever you want. That's not going to happen in this facility, right? The other thing that we have is, you know, the smell. Oh, the smell, it's going to smell, it's going to smell. The technology advances that have come in this industry as we look to states like Colorado and Washington and the air filters they have and the purification systems they have, it's going to be almost impossible to detect that they have a grow facility. Now, when you walk in the front door to greet somebody, are you going to smell something? Possibly. But part of this is the reason it's zoned where it is in an industrial park. It's not next to a school, it's not next to a church, it's tucked away. There's a lot of people who live in this town that didn't even realize there's a street over there where it is, because that's the point of it. It's kind of out of the way. And not that we want to set it in a deep dark corner and forget about it, but there's a reason it's being zoned kind of where it's being zoned, and why even the grower, the facility owners, the growers want to put it there. You know, and as you mentioned, the kind of deep dark web or whatever, the Google, you know, Yahoo search
We all
thing,
see
whatever.
it. Let's cut to the
Yeah,
chase.
you can
It's
go in and
social
look.
media, you know, you're going to hear it.
And you can go in and Google these facilities that are in these other states and Google what's their security like. And you can Google for a resident to be self-informed, and that's my biggest proponent of this thing is become self-informed. Don't listen to the 2 or 3 people that are always on our social media sites, whether they're for or against it, myself included, right? Go out and do the research on your own. show up, listen to the show when the owners come on. They've been open. They passed out their information at the community event that they had. Call them, email them, ask them. Make your decision as a resident. Don't listen to the 2 or 3 people that are constantly passing out some misinformation and are constantly trying to say, oh, don't do this, don't do that. Make up your decision for yourself. That's my biggest ask for the residents of the town.
I think that probably a lot of people don't even know where the industrial park, and I'm not being fresh.
Yeah, no.
I mean, there's tremendous amounts of people that the industrial park is on Franklin Street down by the transfer station.
That's right.
Correct?
That's correct.
There's a little right that goes into East Bridgewater, and if you take a left,
Yep, you go into that.
the entrance, that's the industrial park we're
Industrial
talking
park.
about. Because I saw something on the internet, and they talked about near the senior center. The industrial park and the senior center are pretty far apart.
I think what somebody's referring to is maybe the American Living Assisted Center
Oh,
that's
okay.
down the street from it.
Yep. Valid
Listen,
point.
but the industrial park it's also zoned for adult entertainment district. That's in our industrial park. So there's a lot of other things that are down there that could be just as taboo as this. But we don't have somebody knocking on the door right now with an opportunity to give us some revenue back in the town, and we really need it. The town needs it. We need to look to the future instead of staying in the past.
The 3% that we're talking about here, you said something about 5 years. Does it go away after 5 years?
The community host agreement that the Cannabis Commission is ensuring that all permit applicants are filing for, it's a host agreement between the applicant and the town itself. We say 5 years. It's not mandated that it's 5 years. That number of 5 is also agreeable between the town itself and the person that's applying for the permit. So we're saying 5 years because more than likely this is going to be a 5-year agreement with this company. So it could be less. I don't think it can be more because the 3 Cs have said no, but that's probably what the town of Hanson would be going for, is that 5-year agreement. Me as a citizen, that's what I would be pushing for. I'd be making sure that our Board of Selectmen are enforcing that community agreement for at least a good 5-year plan. And it allows us to really do another litmus test 5 years from now and look back and say, do we take another bite at the apple, so to say, and turn down the permit? The control still remains, not only with the Board of Selectmen, but with the citizens. And that's very important. That's really important that we make sure that everybody knows that. But let's not kick the can down the road 5 years from now and look at all the other towns around us and say, geez, we had that opportunity and it just passed us by. I'd really like for the rest of the town to understand that and to see that this is a great opportunity. And I said it at a town meeting, it's a great opportunity knocking at the door, and we really need to grab it by the horns.
Is this something that we will see at possibly for a vote town meeting in the fall? Or is it kind of one of those deals that once the outreach is done and enough has been done, then it moves into the process? Because I'm trying to give the viewers the idea of what's going to come up. So they won't be, if they missed the legal notices and uninformed, they won't be saying that we got ambushed, so to speak.
Yeah.
I want them to understand the process because that's why we do this show. It's to give information out, and hopefully after we interview the people that are against it, and after we interview the person who's going to be the person, the cultivator or the person growing the product, people might have a better awareness of what it's really all about. Because Patrick, you hit on one point that I agree with. People need to get an education on exactly what's going on with it. But are they going to have an opportunity to, like, you think, vote? Or I don't know what the process is because the cannabis controllers. I would know if, we're a town meeting issue, or the Board of Selectmen obviously are going to set some type of regulation, so the people would definitely have some input, I would think, at selectmen's meetings. And they probably should come, ladies and gentlemen. If it gets to a selectmen's meeting, you should definitely 150% come, because that would be your opportunity to yay or nay, or possibly put some sort of regulations in, whether it's the 5-year term or how it's built. Again, this is all new to me, and I'm trying to get people informed.
So we've had town votes through both town meetings and through the ballot. The processes we have in place, from my understanding, and Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, but this doesn't necessarily have to go to a town vote, right? We have Board of Selectmen in place that can make these decisions.
Correct.
I believe it may have to go through, does it have to go through the zoning committee? But I know it's got to go through the Board of Selectmen in place. So it doesn't necessarily have to go to a town vote. Part of this is, to your point, I do encourage people to show up. We had a lot of folks saying, hey, I got one pulled over. There's pulled over me, but there's a reason that this business and through the state, they have to have multiple of these outreaches. Now, people can come in and yell and scream about certain things, and it's not that the business necessarily has to listen to them, but I think we've got a great board of selectmen and women in place right now that do listen to the people of the town, right? And when we look at the votes that we've had in the past from passing recreational marijuana originally a few years ago on the ballot, as it passed, it was still pretty close, right? And same with when we banned recreation. It was still pretty close on both sides. So we've got about half of our voters leaning one way and just about half of our voters leaning another, right? So I think, again, this comes back to the compromise part of the town. Our board of selectmen will have to do their job and listen to the people of the town, but they have to listen to all the people, not just the 2 or 3 loudest, right? They have to make a good financial decision for the town. And then the company itself that wants to come in, the good part is there's controls. If they don't live up to their end of the agreement, we can pull back. If they don't live up to the laws that the Massachusetts state government has set into place, they could be either fined or shut down immediately, and they won't have an income. So there are those stopgaps and protections in place for us as a town to have some say after the fact as well.
So just, I'm making assumptions, and correct me if I'm wrong, probably the Board of Health will have some say in what's going on, and the boards of selectmen, and they are the people that actually have the control over it, along with the state with their mandates, and also with the police department is obviously
Correct.
going to have
Yeah.
some say in it, because I'm just being honest, I voted against no recreational marijuana because my position on the school committee stating that I don't want it on any roads where schools would be,
Yeah.
because kids are kids.
Sure.
And there's some irony too. When we had that vote at the ballot, some folks that were, prohibitionists, if you will, were pushing for it. They wanted not to have any recreational, but then they also wanted to not have any zoning in place. So I think you said at one town meeting, if something passes or something changes, right now we technically don't have zoning in place for recreation. So if something changes, there's nothing to stop us as a town from putting it in certain places, and we could get sued as a town. Now, the other double-edged sword of this, and why it's complicated because it's new to the state, is if we left zoning in place and then we banned it, we saw towns like Brewster get sued over that because there was some misinformation. So it's a very careful path forward, and part of these checks and balances, as confusing as they can be, is to make sure we do this the right way. Right? Make sure we do it so we don't have it set up next to a school. As somebody with kids in school, I don't want it next to a school either.
No, that's
but
the
I love
last
the
thing.
revenue.
I don't want it
from
on any of the streets.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, but we're talking about a different business.
Sure, absolutely. Completely
I
different
came
business.
in totally, as we use the term, green
Yeah.
about how it is, and I'm trying to do this as informational as possible. And you guys bring up some good points, and I'm sure that there's going to be some people against it that are going to bring up points that I'm not thinking of myself. Because again, I'm a neutral in this whole matter. I'm just trying to get it out there so people get an education.
And I think some of the prohibitionists against it, if you listen through some of their points, a lot of it is just against having it legalized in the state to begin with.
Right.
But that's not the situation we're in, right? As somebody who's a town finance committee member, as somebody who's a resident of the town, looking at the potential revenue that we have a legal product. It's an agricultural product, right? That's going to be sold in the state. But the good part is, again, this comes down to a compromise. It's a facility in our town where nobody can walk up to the store and buy it. Even when the product gets shipped to these other recreational or medical facilities, it's not like a 15-year-old can ride their bike up to the store and walk in, right? These things are, and they've, as a state, have come out with this. They've showcased other states where they've had this. You have to show ID. Sometimes you have to give fingerprints, depending on where you go into.
For employees?
Not only employees, but if you're an advocate of it and you want to go purchase something, you can't just walk in and buy a pack of gummy bears and walk out. There's a ton of different things and checks and balances in place to protect people. And there's laws we have in place right now. You can't drive on it. Does that mean people aren't driving on it? Of course not. But they couldn't drive on it when it was illegal, and there still were, right? It's similar to the DWI laws and things like that. We have these checks and balances in place. We have these laws so we can prosecute people who don't follow the rules behind it. And that's an important thing to have in place, again, these checks and balances. So.
You talked about the police chief being at the very first hearing, so to speak, that they ran, the outreach.
Outreach, yep.
What was his thoughts on it?
So he didn't speak much, and I don't want to put words in his mouth.
I don't want you to.
The question that came up was, had he? Yeah, he's thankfully for all his service he does to the town. The question that came up was, had he had a chance to review their security plan? He was okay with it. He mentioned it met state standards. I don't know the exact words that he used, but he mentioned that it met state standards, and that's what they were looking for. And that was, to me, that seemed to be his biggest concern. Was this going to be, a secure facility? And part of it, we heard him speak a year or two ago at one of the things regarding the town meeting vote that led up to, are we going to have recreational? And he said, you know, as far as training, as far as expenses, whether we have this in town or not, they're still going to have to spend some money as a police department to make sure they're up to standards, to make sure they're up to code, to know how to do the roadside testing, to prevent certain things. And what a lot of people don't recognize is, one, again, this facility, just to be 100% clear, you can't drive up as a citizen and buy something, right? It's not a shop. It's a grow facility that will transport it out of town to sell it elsewhere. But that being said, even these other recreational facilities, when you drive away from it, you can't have it just sitting out in your car. The state law shows you have to have it locked and sealed in your glove box or your trunk. You can't have access to it. So when people get pulled over with this stuff and their car smells of it, they can go and look in the car.
Broke the law.
Yeah, you broke the law. So that's why this, as a state, to me, they've done a nice job looking at these other states to figure out how can we make sure that if this is an adult choice that somebody wants to do, just like having a glass of wine after dinner, right? Or, you know, for some people it might be prescription medication. You know, if somebody wants to make this choice as an adult, they have to do it as a safe way that won't endanger other people. And I look at it as a similar industry to those industries, and how do we regulate it and how do we protect folks that want to make that decision as an adult.
Well, we're getting right to the end of this show. It was, I'd have to say, I know a little bit more about it now than I did when we started. And I'm one of those people that, again, didn't have the education on what's going on, and I did vote against it for the recreational purposes. I don't think it should be sold on streets in the town of Hanson, but this sounds like a totally different thing. I really, I want to thank the both of you for coming in and voicing your view. And ladies and gentlemen, as I said in the beginning, we're going to be running a 3 or a 4 or even a 5-part series on this facility. We're going to bring in people, we have proponents here, we're going to have people that are against it or opposed to it. We're going to have the grow facility people in to tell us and give us a better education on exactly what's going to go on if it does happen to be in the industrial park. Because I'm going to ask them about water usage, I'm going to ask them about smell,
Sure.
all these things that I saw. So if anyone out there, and you're watching this show, would like to contact me and propose some questions that I can ask, my email is bobhayes4433@gmail.com, or you can call me on my cell phone at 617-538-0189. Please, ladies and gentlemen, don't be bashful. That's what we're trying to do here with the show, is get everybody an education on what's going to happen in the industrial park, in Hanson, that's not just on social media, but they can hear all the different parts. And these people are definitely doing some outreach. We're going to be having him here at WHCA. And I want to thank you all for watching Bring It On. Don't go anywhere, because we're going to be back with more on this controversial subject. Thanks for watching Bring It On.